Welcome to SpeakEasy. This is a podcast to talk about tech, to talk about the current vibes and the current zeitgeist that is happening in the world. The point of the podcast is to talk to the most interesting people I can find. And I'd like to welcome today to the very first edition of the SpeakEasy podcast, a good friend of mine, Nico Svane. So I met Nico at network school, where we both spent a few months living in the concept of a startup society run by the famous investor Balaji Srinivasan. And I loved getting to know Nico there, learn from him. I went to a few sessions that he ran, he went to a few sessions that I ran, and we would also just hang out. It was really, really cool. A little bit more about Nico. He's a marketer and emerging tech enthusiast with a passion for content creation, obsessively studying the greats, and a major advocate for intentional living. His marketing love language is organic content and product-led growth. And yeah, welcome to the podcast, Nico. Thanks for joining.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So I guess where we could start is tell me why you got into marketing and like a bit of your background of what led you to your current role.
Yeah, I got into it initially when I like in my when I was 16 or something, when I initially tried to just do some business stuff online, and I tried to start that was back in 2018 or something, when I think dropshipping was kind of emerging as this popular thing. So I tried that out, and as a result of that, I was doing some paid ads and trying to learn that. But alongside that, I was doing a little bit of organic content as well, and I just kind of fell in love with that and realized that I didn't really like paid ads that much. I really like the idea of organic content and the scale of that if you really can pull it off. And I learned a lot of things doing that e-com store, and didn't succeed. But one of the things I learned as well was that, like, as I started to get a few sales and stuff like that and had to do some customer support, I hated doing that because I was selling like bracelets and like rings and stuff like that. And it initially I thought, okay, I just hate customer support, but then I kind of realized, no, it's actually much more about I just need to care a lot about what I'm selling, whether that's building the business in other ways, or if it's doing the marketing. So as a result of that, I ended up just shutting that down because I moved to the US for a year, then came back, started in school, and then I was like 18 and I was learning a lot about investing and trading and stuff like that. And that's when I really started the first real marketing thing, I would say. Like I was in this investing community on Discord. And I liked it a lot, and I felt like there's probably some naivete to it in terms of how good I was at marketing, but I felt like I could probably grow it if I did some content for them. So I just proposed that I could do some organic content for them, grow it through that. And it did pretty well, like on Instagram. Did some educational content there. It helped scale that community from about 25K MRR to over 150K MRR in like 3 months. And that, like, so I learned a lot from that as well. Like, again, I was 18 and I just proposed to that, and there was kind of just a handshake deal that I'll help you do this and you'll pay me some commissions. I didn't end up getting that much from it, but I learned a lot from that as well, and really, again, just saw the power of organic content, and I felt like I was getting better at it as well. So throughout that, I did that. I did a few other just personal experiments on. I started on Instagram and then moved over to doing a few things on TikTok, not that much, because I'm not really a fan of short form per se, and did some things on YouTube as well. And especially on YouTube, that's when I really realized that as part of creating the content, I really dreaded doing the video editing, being on camera, like doing the voiceover and all of that. But I love the writing and research part, which naturally just led me over to doing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn and X, which is where I then started doing that. I was ghostwriting for someone as I just got out of high school back in 2022. I did that for a few months, and then I started working at Binance and worked there for a year doing some social media there.
That is pretty insane. That is an awesome story. Do you find that because of your, like, I guess Did you have anything different in your upbringing, like until you hit that investor community that, and until you did the drop shipping, that helped you like think differently? Is that something that was like, because I've read a bunch of your content and it's always awesome. It's like it's got an edge to it. And I'm wondering if that is like from your own um, information diet per se.
Yeah, I, I I think maybe a reason I'm kind of obsessed with really learning from a lot of the greats and really studying them is that from my personal life and like just upbringing, I didn't really have anyone who were like entrepreneurial. Like I have an awesome family that still like with what I'm doing now and like when I started, very supportive about everything. But like my parents, they're both accountants, and then there's like one other banker, like my grandpa, and then everyone else is like blue collar in my family. So no one really doing anything entrepreneurial. So I wasn't really learning that throughout my upbringing. So that's also why I think when I started that dropshipping thing, and I think I changed my information diet quite a lot. So I think like just having kind of almost like revelation about some of the things of like you can actually kind of create your whole other path here. Like you don't have to take this traditional path, and there's a whole other world that you can explore of like actually creating your own things and really pursuing your own thing. So
That's awesome.
I think it was mostly like I've talked with someone else about it, and he kind of put it in a funny way, which I think is kind of spot on. That part of it was kind of just like luck of the algorithm, like just serving me some of the right content the same at the right time when I was like 16, and I was having a bit of a hard time in school, and like I had dropped football, which is like what I had been doing all my life, like growing up, like obsessively playing that a lot, and I dropped that, and as most people have in probably their teens, like some identity crisis. And then I was just think served some of the right thing at the right time, which just led me down this path of realizing that hey, I can actually just create my kind of my own path and just actually learn things myself. Like you know, kind of the saying it's kind of popular right now in our world. Like you just do things,
Do things.
and I I kind of just realized that in some way at that point, which yeah, I think a bit of like luck of the algorithm, I suppose.
Yeah, back in my day, I think I'm a little older. So for me, the expression used to be like like seeing through the matrix and being able to see the matrix. But I prefer the new phrase, but it's kind of true. It's like you were able to see something that other people couldn't there, especially in that community, the investing community, that you're like, oh, like if they say, if they are putting out these kinds of posts, they can X or 10X or whatever. And then you kind of made that happen for them. And it almost like it was almost like it was easy for you to just see that and do that.
Yeah, and I think like I learned so many things from that, which I think I I still don't have them like that concrete, but at least back then it wasn't as clear to me either. But like some of the things was also that how I ended up just working for them and got paid was also just pursuing them, saying, "Hey, I can do this for you," and like kind of, I suppose, like kind of intuitively just structuring some sort of offer to them that just had no risk for them.
Hmm.
And like, I think that's like kind of thinking of like trying to make an offer to people who you want to work for to create that opportunity for yourself. Like, I think that's also a bit of a skill in itself that you end up honing over the years, especially in the beginning to really land just a few of those initial things so you get some proof of work.
Yeah, 100%. It's like one thing to be a really good marketer or a copywriter, but it's another thing to be a good business person. Those are like two totally separate things, and you were able to just like put them together and make that your package.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. So that's where I kind of I started. Like a few years before that, I think like the first money I made online was just selling FIFA coins. I don't know if you played that, like you know, in Madden and FIFA and NHL, NBA. There's like Ultimate Team, so you can earn coins in there. And I I was really obsessed with like not per se playing the games, like, playing the football game, but like the whole thing of understanding the markets of Ultimate Team, of like trading players, and like you were kind of forecasting certain trends coming, so you were buying certain players because like that's I don't know, a bit of the, I think, my nerdy data math-ish side coming through as well, that I was just really obsessed with doing that. So I was doing that all the time, and like also when I was with my friends at like LAN parties during the weekends, I was still doing that, and then selling a bit of that. I didn't make that much money from it, but it was just, I think, a bit of like, what, like if you were to talk with any of my childhood friends, all of them would probably say that I I was, and also probably my parents, my family, they would all expect me to probably get into some sort of engineering thing because I was very much just
Yeah,
a,
analytical and
yeah, like really, like very much. And I never did anything creative really growing up, to be honest. Like I just played a lot of football and then video games. Like didn't, so that's also like the interesting part, I think, that if like now, if I talk with people, they will usually probably like label me as this creative person, and I'm a marketer, so I'm this creative person, probably a little bit all over the place, and like probably don't do that much with data and all of that. But I think that's really powerful when you have that combination as well, like what I've seen with some other marketers as well, like if you are obsessed with the data side as well.
it's really interesting because yeah, that really is like a whole kind of third part of it is that it's like not the creative side, it's not the business side, but it's the data analytics side. Am I echoey? I feel like I can hear an echo. I'm gonna turn off echo cancellation. I'm gonna stop test test. Okay, perfect. Okay, my next question for you. So we have the business side, we have the creative side, and then you have your analytic side, but you haven't felt like you've used it much. Is that something that you can see having a role in like the new meta that's shaping up with vibe marketing and everything being kind of data driven and tokenized? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that will be more and more important. Like we've we've seen it become more important, I think, over the past 10 years or something, as especially social media and like paid ads in that way became like you would have just much more data on people and what you were doing. But I think it'll be useful in a bit of a different way in the coming decades. I don't know exactly how that will play out, but I think like obviously there's kind of a crackdown on privacy, and like you will probably have less data in some ways. But I think there will be some ways of like that as AI also gets much better, that it will be able to still recognize certain patterns in entirely different ways, which will in turn, in some ways, be able to autonomously create some campaigns or something, with still a little bit of input from human. And in like how I think data plays into that is that like I think the great marketers, they understand the right rules, if that makes sense. Like they've studied the game enough to understand the right rules, but then they also know when to break them. And I think to be able to analyze that, or like identify that, you need to really also dive into the data and not be too caught up in your craft, or like the art of creating some beautiful marketing campaign or something. And yeah, I think that that was like a bit of a drawn out answer for that, but I think it'll become more and more important to actually really be able to look into the data and act on that.
That's really interesting. Do you feel like the AI systems like the LLMs or any like predictive system like that will have the same kind of ability as like the most cracked marketer where it is like you said, like 99% follow what works and then 1% do something crazy? Or do you think you always need like a human in the loop?
Yeah, I think uh, like I think people will become more and more, like this is more, a bit of a trend I think I'm seeing, like people will become more and more sensitive to what we've known as traditional marketing, like traditional advertising of like, here's my product, like look at this, like here's this discount, or I don't know, like all of that stuff. I think people will become more and more sensitive to that, so they will prefer more and more kind of product placement. Like I wrote about this in a recent post as well about Expensify and F1, and I don't remember the exact data point, but it was that the vast majority of Gen Z actually like product placement because like when it's done well, and it often is when you actually really study what's going on in short form content where people are in a whole other way that I think is overlooked by a lot of either non-marketers or especially like older people like 50 plus, like just not understanding what's going on with user generated content and how that type of like kind of authentic integration of a product into what seems like just natural organic content. So I think that there will be a way to still use AI to scale that up in ways, but I think there will still be an element of like you need that human in the loop to create a proper brand. Like there's this whole idea in marketing that you can do exceptional advertising and terrible branding at the same time. And I think, like for example, Cluely is a pretty good example of, in some ways, popularizing this in the tech space. That like attention at all costs, like just as many eyeballs on you as possible, even if it's not aligning with your brand. And I think there's some merit to that. That in some ways that is very valuable to just get a ton of eyeballs on you. But at the same time, I think where the human in the loop comes in is that you can probably do that at scale, like just get a ton of eyeballs on you with AI as, again, for example, a lot of data. It will be able to, in some ways, autonomously just test out 1,000 different iterations for a small thing and just iterate on that without a human in the loop. So it can get a lot of eyeballs on you, but I think the difficult thing will be kind of adhering to the brand that you're creating, like the overall thing that you're building with this company. And I think that's where the human in the loop comes in. So it's much more about the long-term thing, I think, where the human in the loop comes in.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely I definitely agree with a lot of that, and I think there's like different parts there. There's like the UGC as the whole new meta, and I read a report recently that Unilever was like investing, it's like tripling its investment in user-generated content and kind of moving away from big advertising campaigns, and it's like just going deeper and deeper into, TikTok and Instagram and Reels and all of that in short form. And then the way that that content is being produced now is sort of either like in your face, like here is my, skincare product. I'm gonna do a thing on it, or like trying to trying to get really clever with like a hook, and then they don't even mention the app or, the product, and then maybe someone in the comments does, and it's a whole game. And then with clearly that's another great one where basically the brand is Roy Lee and like the founder, and just him being this kind of obnoxious kid. And like, but that is the brand, is like that Times Square billboard that he put up,
Yeah,
which is like, what do you think about that
I think
as a like marketer?
I think I don't know, like it's a bit difficult to analyze because I think the natural thing is just to say it seemed a little, yeah, a bit of like a waste of money in a way, like that. Okay, yeah, you're buying this, and okay, it seems cool in a way that you're doing this low effort thing of like just pouring a lot of money on this and like just doing some weird ad. But I think I would definitely have done something different. I don't know exactly what, but I think that the Cluey thing is still very interesting. That like they on TikTok and Instagram that they are testing like a dozen few or like a few dozen different things to get eyeballs on it. Again, with that thing in mind, with like you can do excellent advertising but terrible branding. And I think like Roy has also posted about this, that if you actually look into what they're doing on Instagram and TikTok, they're also doing things that are completely different from the brand of like Roy Lee, like not like controversial stuff, but also entirely different things, appealing to entirely different target audiences. And I think that that's very interesting as well. And like, I think that's one of like the metas at the moment, or probably in the future as well, that you're able to experiment on a whole lot of different things. And again, that's where again some of the data comes in, that you probably have some human in the loop to look into some of the data and double down on what works, but you're still continuously just iterating and experimenting on a ton of different things. And that's just not that's not just like, let's say, 20 ad creatives on a given ad, but it's like a dozen different completely uncorrelated on like different experiments on something in UGC. You're doing some growth hacking experiment, you're doing some, yeah, just a bunch of different things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. They actually had a post today, like a blog post on virality and hype, which I haven't read yet, but I did come across it, and this conversation just reminded me to take another look. It's interesting, and it seems to be like somewhere in the last 8 months or so, like the meta kind of turned into this full-blown content-driven thing where it's like content over everything, virality and over everything. And even with A16Z, you started seeing Mark Andreessen like going hard on every podcast. He's messaging me. He's like, "Can I be on Speakeasy tomorrow?" But yeah, it seems interesting, and I think it makes sense because if the cost of building goes down, then your moat starts to only be distribution.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, yeah, like, well, I think my takeaway from some of that is also that I think more brands will focus on what you might call like cultural infiltration or something like that. Like you'll focus more again on that brand, and like in some ways that I think that will also change marketing a lot for the marketers, that like in the way that like the difficult thing with organic content is that when you're working with someone, like especially the the C-suite, and you have to justify it in some ways to the CEO or the CFO or something in terms of the ROI on whatever you're doing, is that it's generally very difficult to attribute like what's actually coming from the piece of content that you're making and the brand that you're building. And I think if that will become more and more of the main way that you're doing marketing, like doing these subtle authentic integrations into organic content, that it will change a lot of ways in how you're working as a marketer, because some of the traditional metrics like, click-through rate, or maybe even like engagement rates, and like it will just change entirely how you measure all of these things. And exactly how it'll play out, I don't quite know, but I think that if you're moving much more towards the main thing being organic content, that, yeah, maybe some new systems will come up to make it easier to attribute these things. But again, with the some of the crackdown on like privacy and like, really that becoming more important, I don't know how easy that will be to do, but I think that will change a lot as well. And I think might, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking from a marketer's perspective, that the difficult thing again is also just when and how will the CEOs or CFOs realize some of this as well. Like,
You think they're
if this is
lagging
becoming,
behind?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like if this is becoming the new meta, and like you aren't no longer able to reliably just, okay, we're gonna raise a bunch of money, pour that into paid ads, and then we know we have, customer acquisition costs for this, because that's just what we can see in the dashboard on like Meta's ads. Then it'll change. Yeah, it'll just change things a lot in terms of how you're operating as both the marketer, but also if the C-suite are able to catch up properly. And I think that that ties a little bit back to the whole thing with experimenting, that I think that's an important part of the culture of what you're doing as well,
Mhm.
that there is a bit of an like inherent understanding that we need to experiment on a bunch of things and then double down on some of that of what works.
That's really interesting because, yeah, it does feel like if you look at the history of social media, you have like almost 5 to 10 years where we're like, oh, this is a new thing, Instagram, Facebook, these are new things. And then, even before that was like blogs. People are now blogging. It's a big deal. And then it's like, okay, like this is a way to do marketing. And now it's like, okay, this is the way to do marketing and like UGC and all of that. I'm very fascinated by the concept of like virality in the algorithm as a, what do you call it? Like a sustainable or replicatable metric. If it's something that you can actually kind of double down on and go even deeper. And my question for you here is like, where do you see technology playing a role in virality and the algorithm in the next 5 years, let's say? It's like, assume we get cool advances in technology and these trends continue.
Again, on in terms of I think developing the algorithm and that I think from the platforms there will be just an increasing focus on cracking down on bots, I think. And also I think even like it's difficult to know exactly when Nikita Beer posts like how much of it is shit posting. But I think he's been posting a little bit about some of the things that they're making as changes in the algorithm on X, for example. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I found interesting as well was also like low effort posts. I don't know exactly how they define that, but like that's for example in communities that's like a common thing to have as well, that like as part of some of your guidelines, that you don't want people to do low effort posts, and you can like you can kind of tell as a human like when that's done, and maybe you can do that in the algorithm as well. But I think there'll be more and more of a focus on those things as well, like diving much deeper into really identifying who's a bot, who's not, and who's who's actually contributing value. However you want to define that, I don't quite know, but I think there'll be much more of a focus on that, which ties a little bit back to again like when you're a marketer or like indie hacker or whatever, like you want to doing marketing, that I think it'll like prolong the timeline for when you can actually automate more and more of this, because the platforms will kind of play catch up with like identifying some of these trends that the whatever technology is available are doing as common patterns if it's AI generated. So I think, yeah, I think that that's positive if the platforms will are able to do more and more for focus on that. Just again in terms of making more and more authentic content and hopefully less AI slop. But at the same time, yeah, it's difficult because yeah, again, that's a bit again the thing of like the long term thinking, and like if you're doing the short term thinking, a lot of AI slop will do very well in terms of that, like driving a lot of
Yes.
views and engagement, and probably for a lot of e-com as well, or like some like lower ticket products, it'll do very well there as well, like doing some sort of AI slop, uh, maybe UGC in some way. Uh, it can do very well, and also not just in terms of views, but also converting into something. Yeah, I think that yeah, that that's where I kind of see the technology side of like how much of a lag is there between how much of the platforms are catching up to the common patterns of the output of what would be like AI generated.
Yeah, and there's also like it's basically an arms race anyway, where as the technology to detect bots gets better and slop, like the slop improves and will get better as well. So maybe we will see a future where it's a more sophisticated, like much more sophisticated marketing environment that is like the top tier of any kind of companies, like how well you can do that outreach and that distribution.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The devil's advocate to that is then just still like why is so much low effort content and so much AI slop doing well? It is because so many people
It's
kind of
true. People
yeah.
like the slop,
Yeah, I mean
and
they
that's okay, I
whether
guess.
they consciously like just mindlessly scrolling or not,
Mm.
they definitely do just subconsciously just like mindlessly scrolling.
And actually, that's a really good point. That is actually a really good point because it's the whole like power law, like 80/20 principle, where maybe we're talking about it in terms of like, or I was talking about it in terms of like, what you want to make like a well-crafted marketing thing, whereas um, for 80% of people, they just need to see someone being like, oh my God, I tried this new app on TikTok. And someone's like, what, really? And then they click on it, or, the low effort stuff. And I guess for me, my information diet or my content diet is mostly Twitter, where I'm sort of seeking for more of those like, I don't know, nuanced takes, tech takes, and all that. But I think most people are probably scrolling on TikTok or Reels. So wow. And so for them, it's like, and maybe there's no real incentive for Facebook or TikTok to try and crack down on that, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And
It's kind
that's
of
yeah. That's
backfill.
that's the difficult part because yeah, it's yeah. Again, like Munger always said, like if you give me the incentive, I'll give you the outcome, and like you can kind of apply that here as well, of course. Like with the platforms, what is the incentive? It is to keep you hooked,
Yeah.
and like to what extent can we do that while in probably mainly the regulator's perspective seem as acceptable or like adequately complying to whatever they want.
It's true. And I mean, these platforms are very wealthy. Like they are able to kind of get their way to some degree. Like it makes me think there's like a video of a bunch of people at a casino just like pressing the button on the slot machine. And there's no, there's no like you're not even pulling the lever anymore. You're just pressing the button over and over. And maybe that is where we're headed. Maybe we're already there. TikTok and Reels with short form video content.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's also the interesting thing with like kind of you can probably apply broader to social media as well, but just like how much it enables these echo chambers of you're living in these different worlds. Like we probably live in very much of the same world, even though I'm in Denmark right now, you're in Canada, and we also work completely different jobs. And then if I go talk to my parents or some of my friends here, they will not know like pretty much anything that I'm consuming because it's just an
Yeah.
entirely different world. Like they won't understand any of it. And I think that's just a very interesting thing as well, like how that is made possible and how that might be in the future as well with like yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We speak the same language, but to some of my friends that I went to high school with or college, we don't speak the same language, or our shared language is like more specific to like those experiences and Toronto or Canada or whatever. But speaking the same language, I think is something like in our community, but then when you think of it applied to like that 80% broader view, it's like the latest kind of celebrity influencer or, like the regular stuff that has kind of been timeless, like breakups or, fallouts and that kind of thing. There's something to be said about if you can speak that language or at least hook into that for that user base, if those are your users, then there's a really interesting, like you have that power to kind of like lean in there and do that.
Yeah. 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 That's also the danger of like if you're trying to like make something overly complex or something because you might think that's better, whether that's the whole strategy or if it's just each post that you're trying to make it more and more nuanced and like perfecting the details, perfecting the wording and all that, when in reality, as you're saying, that it is very much a power law of like 80/20, and most people they'll like generally the simpler stuff. And yeah, but I think like one thing this reminds me of as well is that I see very much of a trend of people saying that like short form is just is everything. Like it's people's
Hmm.
like people's attention spans are terrible. It's just all short form. But I think that's not quite true either. Like it might be a little bit of that power law that maybe most people do that, but at the same time, you see YouTube overtaking Netflix and Hulu and like all other streaming platforms in terms
Hmm.
of usage and like just overall, and also watch time. And
Hmm.
also an interesting thing I saw recently was how much of like time watched on TVs on different streaming platforms, and YouTube is the top of that as well, which I think is very interesting, because I think if you consider watching something on the TV, I think maybe a few people will still watch short form on there, but I think most people will probably watch like either like some longer form videos of like at least 10 minutes, or they're putting a podcast or a movie on or something. And I think like that's also what you're seeing with podcasts becoming, it seems like in the past 10 years or something, more and more and more popular. That I think it is not quite true, that that whole idea that short form is everything, everyone's attention spans are terrible, and you just need to maximize everything for like putting in into like 30-second reels that are like, yeah, like hyper edited. I think it's there's still very much like merit to, if you're making like some quality content of, again, building up some sort of brand, ideally where people are coming for.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, and I feel like especially Gen Z and like Gen A, that they're kind of raised on this short form content, and maybe because like that's the first kind of content they can consume, like they can, it's and then it becomes harder for them to adapt, whereas older people maybe appreciate long form content more, or like you get sort of a smaller slice of people who in like Gen Z or Gen A that are more willing to take on longer content. But I kind of see, yeah, like there's kind of going to be a big divide in the future of like short form versus long term content, and it's like a very different ball game depending on which one you're marketing to, which one you have to market to.
Yeah, yeah. And also just in terms of, again, the ones who are creating content, just how much you're thinking short term, how much you're thinking long term. Because, for example, a platform like TikTok, and I think honestly, it kind of started there, that followers just mattered so much less. Like, and I
Mm.
think that's kind of spilled over to the other platforms by now as well. That in general, your followers just doesn't matter that much, because most of your content you'll see is recommendations just from other people, but also just something you've engaged with. So it doesn't matter that
Mm.
much if you actually press follow or not. And in turn, that metric kind of becomes a vanity metric. So I think that's also the interesting part. Like with, for example, again, I said like it's kind of started on TikTok with just followers becoming so much less relevant. And that also matters a lot when you're creating the content, because if how however many, like 99% of people on the platform are consuming the content is on the For You page, and they're just served completely by the algorithm, like nothing else than that, then that changes things a lot as well, because you can't reliably create this piece of content. People click follow, and you know that they'll, like a newsletter or something, that they'll get the next piece that I put out, and then they can read that. Because I think this is something I sometimes wrestle a little bit with some of the clients as well, that if they don't quite have the understanding that when you're putting a piece of content out, it's very rare that it's actually served to that many of your followers, and also just the people who've seen it in the past. So you can't make like a series in the same way that you might do like when you're doing things on TV or something. I think maybe this is still like a generational thing, but just something I'm still seeing very much, that some people also like in executive positions, that they just don't have that understanding that there isn't a such thing that that the content pieces are tied together. it's all one individual piece that
Mhm.
you shouldn't analyze each piece entirely on their own. You should analyze like the bigger picture, but you should create each piece kind of in a way where you are not assuming that they've seen anything else from you. I think that's a big, maybe some of the people that we're appealing to, maybe some of that might be obvious, but it's something I'm seeing very much of like a misconception of socials from some executives of like even as young as like early 40s, where that's just not how socials work. Like you can't do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's like sort of bringing back the analytical piece where it's sort of true. Like, let's say you have 1,000 followers and you put out a piece of content and it goes viral, but only 100 of your followers see it, but like 100,000 other people see it. Sort of, you can put out that same piece of content, slightly modified again and again, probably a whole bunch of times, and just keep serving it to different slices. And maybe your followers add some sort of amplification, maybe not. Maybe the content itself, because it's similar, is like there's some sort of feedback loop for more amplification. But I fully agree with what you're saying. Like, and I've seen it too. It's like it's the same content, just slightly different, and there's no continuity between it. But if it works, it works. And as the person putting it out, like, fair play. Why would you change if you have something that's working?
Yeah, yeah. But there's also this guy on X. I don't think he's that active anymore, but he's the guy who created the Tweet Hunter, or one
Mm-hmm.
of the co-creators of that, J.K. Molina, and he has this saying about it. Twitter is all about just saying one thing in 1,000 different ways, and I think that applies very much to, again, also just if we're tying back to some of the other things we talked about with like this long-term thinking, being the human in the loop of creating that brand as well, that you have some of that coherence through all of that, that you're saying somewhat of the same thing in 1,000 different ways of like creating that brand. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be the exact same message or the same word, but just again creating that brand in that way, I think is very crucial. So
Mm-hmm.
that ties a little bit back to what I was saying before, that you're creating all these posts and you shouldn't analyze each of them individually. You should analyze the bigger picture of your holistic strategy, if you would call it that. Like, I don't really like the word strategy because I feel like too many people use it in a way that it needs to be this complex thing. It really doesn't. But I think just again that analytical perspective of creating your holistic strategy, that you're creating all these individual posts and then in some way like analyzing the coherence through, well, like between them with that one thing that you're saying in 1,000 different ways.
Damn, that's epic. That is a really cool way to see the future of marketing as well, especially with like everything we're going through right now. Having that sense of coherence in your message over, 100 different variations or 1,000 different variations, as long as all of that content is serving towards the whole. And it sort of fits the model of other things where it's like the history of like cloud computing is like you have one computer and then you have, a group of computers that scale up, and then a swarm, and you have orchestration for the swarm. So maybe we'll see like these orchestration layers come in for marketing where it's like, okay, we have this swarm doing this message in 1,000 ways, and this swarm in this channel doing 1,000 things, and like the money flows to this one, but actually this one is getting higher attribution somehow, and so now we move it there. It's very cool. Wow. I want to change topics real quick. I would love for you to share your Alex Hormozy story. Um, that is one of my favorite stories. It's the story you shared with us at Network School, and I was hoping you would be down to tell a version of that story today.
Yeah, sure. So it was like I mentioned earlier, I worked at Binance. I worked there for a year. Then I quit that in like early January 2024 to what I'm working on now. And at that point, we didn't really have anything really specific of like this is exactly a proven thing, like making money and all that. We were just testing a bunch of things out. So as a result of that, I was still dabbling with a few side projects, or you could call them experiments, in terms of maybe I could make some money from this, or maybe something could come out of this, or maybe it could serve as a good case study in some way for what we were about to do. And one of them was that I saw there's this guy called Andrew Kirby who I've been following for a while. He used to make content on YouTube. He's got like 600K followers. Used to make a lot of stuff about stoicism and some philosophy stuff. And he had started a community on School. And on there, I wasn't that active on School, but I somehow saw this post very early. And he posted that I think it was on Wednesday. He posted this on a Friday or something. On Wednesday, there'll be a big thing. And I think he posted like a picture of Hamosi. And that turned out to be that Hamosi became a co-owner of School. And as part of that, they created the School Games, which was this new campaign where you joined a community on School. The top 10 of that, in terms of most new MRR added, would be invited out to Vegas to meet Hamosi and Sam Evans and the 10 other winners and spend a day with them. And I saw that and I thought, awesome, man. And that would be pretty cool if I could do that. But this was just a new campaign. Hamosi had posted about it. It had a ton of traction, and I knew I'd spoken with Andrew before because I was trying to become like creative director for him, and I was among like the last few people to talk with him, and I ended up working at Binance instead. But as doing that, I learned from him as well that what he had been doing was onboarding big creators onto the platform before that to build their community there. And I knew that was happening now as well at an even bigger scale. So if I wanted to get invited, like the chance of me being in those top 10, and I didn't have an audience or anything, and I was competing with people with some of them are millions of followers, or at least like a few 100,000, some of them in communities elsewhere, there would be no chance for that. So there was one exception to being invited, which was if you invited a winner, or if you referred one of the winners to the platform. And interestingly, I ended up doing that. But interestingly, when I ended up talking with Sam and Andrew, they were kind of debating when they saw I'd done that if I even should be invited at that point, because they were expecting the person who would refer a winner would be someone who knew them like personally, and they would be, hey bro, come over, like join this platform. But I didn't know the guy who referred, and I did that because how I did it was I saw, okay, there's this one exception to being invited. That would be inviting or like referring a winner over here. How can I refer some people over here, and hopefully one of them would be a winner? If none of them is a winner, I will still just make money from commissions if I end up succeeding at whatever I would do. So I thought that, and it came very naturally to me because I'd been creating content before, that I should just chop up a bunch of things from Hamosi. He kind of taken care of all of the quality content, quality ideas, delivering it well. My job was just packaging it well and putting it into some good clips. And that's what I did then. Created an account on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok to just do that. I spent about 10 hours just on a single day at just creating all of these clips. I had enough to post multiple short form and long form every day for like 3 weeks or something. And as I did that, like the very first video, long form, got I think 42,000 views or something in the first week, which is pretty good on YouTube. Like on TikTok and Instagram, I didn't really work out, didn't really matter. But on YouTube, it worked out fairly well. So yeah, long story short, that worked out pretty well, making all these clips on YouTube. My job was just packaging, which I had done before, like the video editing, the thumbnails and the titles, and then like finding the right clips. And I ended up getting a little over like 200 referrals from that. So I've made like 18,500 or something from it by now, from just those 10 hours. And then I got invited out to meet them as well. And I think perhaps even what made me the most money, honestly, is just having that story, because as I got back, I made a post about it as well. And that did better than any other post I'd done at that point, just on my LinkedIn. And it got me like, you can find it on my profile if anyone watches this, but I have the specific numbers there. But I got a few job offers from tech companies. I got the first client for what we were doing at that point as well, and got a lot of traction from that. So honestly, the story is perhaps the most powerful thing, to be honest.
That's epic. That is like one of my favorite stories that I heard at network school, and I never get tired of you telling it. It's so good. And what's awesome about it is like again, you like saw through the matrix. You just did things, and you were just like, okay. And you didn't just see, you saw from like A to Z. You're like, okay, I need to do this, and then this will happen, and then that will happen. Because I've heard like the other like a more detailed version as well, where you're like, okay, this guy was like the winner, so I'm gonna help pump his ads and like get him closer to it. And that's just so crazy that you had the conviction and you were able to just like keep going with it.
In retrospect, like I spent about only like $200 on ads or something, just on some of my own videos there on YouTube. Uh, and in retrospect, I've like, as some people might have done when they're like investing or trading or something. Man, I mean, if I'd pumped a little bit more in here, I could have like, if I'd pumped like 10x more in, I would have made 10x the money. Damn, fuck. Like
That's funny.
I've done that a few times, but
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
you gotta always be upset with your 10 baggers or your 100 baggers because no matter how much you put in, it would have never been enough.
yeah, true. Yeah, but yeah, I got an awesome story from that, and like it's my first time in Vegas. I made again about like reusing some of your stories. I think I've made 3 posts about this, and they all did really well. So, and this is what about two, no, 1.5 year after it happened. I made like 3 posts about it, and so yeah.
Okay. I have a challenge question for you. If you had to hack your way into a meeting or conversation with Nikita Beer, how would you do that today?
I think
That's a tough one because he's now in his new
yeah,
role. So there is
like
some instability there, but
like he's I think he's so like extremely busy that that would be the difficult part. Like then with like there's I'm trying to think through, like I think there's kind of different levels to busyness, if that makes sense. Like there's him where like he's literally on that job, and I think he shared something about like that. I think his phone changed home to be the ex office because he was just there all the time. Like there's those type of people where they're busy in that way, and then there's other people where it's more like they just have a lot of inbound coming, so it's difficult to kind of be the one who stand out among that, but they just have a lot of options essentially. uh, like that would be, I don't know, some other big investor or something, or like that you would get on the radar of. So I'm trying to think through that, where if you were to get on his radar, I think it would be crucial that you somehow get yourself like a spot on whatever, like he like think of him like as being on like a bus or something. Like that's the big mission that he's on with the X team, big bus. Like you have to get some seat on there, and that could be either like, I don't know, working there in some sort of way, but I think the challenge is probably to do it in another way, like not just work there. And I think in that way the quote unquote hack would still require a lot of effort in terms of just providing like he lives on X, and I see him engage with a lot of people on X as well. Also people who are like seemingly nobodies, who I don't see anyone I know following, and they have no followers. And he's thanking them, he's engaging with them, asking questions, he replies to DMs. So when you see that, then you just have to provide a lot of value. So in that way, you would have to, like, it might be easier maybe on I don't know, engineering side, in terms of spotting some different things of, like, I saw this, maybe this could be an interesting thing. I saw this guy the other day who created this, I think Chrome extension, and I think he's creating an app now to solve bookmarks and solve like proper advanced search or something on X, because that is terrible right now.
yeah, always has been.
Sometimes, yeah, I mean, yeah, like sometimes if you search for, like, for example, a name or something, and it's not their handle, they won't even show up in like the first searches, even though they have it as their other name, and bookmarks as well is just a mess. So I saw this other guy creating a Chrome extension, which was a great solution to that. And I think something like that, where you need to put in the effort to create something that shows you've put in effort, and or that you are just absolutely exceptional. So in so with, for example, I think you could do this with both type of people, again, with the levels of busyness. So there's the people like Nikita, who you probably won't get his attention at all if you're not doing something that is closely related to X in some way. Whereas, for example, the other people, you might get their attention and time of day if you're creating something adjacent to some of their current endeavors, or maybe it's just entirely different because you just show that you are a worthwhile person to bet on something with. So I think with Nikita, someone like that, where he's just locked in on X, nothing else, then you need to create something that provides direct value to that and show you can solve an urgent and actually like a problem that's valuable to solve. And yeah, if that was like a proper answer.
No, that's an awesome answer. And that's going to be like the highlight clip because that was a really tough question and I really put you on the spot with it. So thank you for just taking that and running with it because that was really awesome to. It's not just the answer, but it's like to see how you work through it. Because I have no doubt, like you're that kind of person that you like if you want to connect with a certain individual like that, you're just like, okay, like here is how I'm going to connect with them. That is, and that's like probably exactly what. Because I also see like I don't know if you saw the recipe generator meme. Like some
No.
guy messaged him and was like, hey, like this is how do I get more people looking at my tweets? And Nikita's like, look at your tweets and had a screenshot of the guy's tweets. He's like, these are the worst tweets I've ever seen. One of the tweets was literally just recipe generator. And then the guy
Yeah.
responded and Nikita just replied with recipe generator just to taunt him. So it's
Yeah.
like, I think you're exactly right. I think you would have to either be on his pulse, like where he tweets, reply, add value, and you probably stand a decent chance if you are doing that like day in, day out, and or just build tools for X. And yeah, I love just seeing you work through that. Thank you. And that was like a
I,
definitely put you on the spot there.
I think what you just said like is an important thing for people to remember as well, that these type of people, they actually they're not out of reach. Like they will in most cases. Maybe you have to follow up a few times, but they will in most cases read the DMs or like the email if you find the right place to reach them. Some of them make it explicitly clear that I don't check my LinkedIn DMs. Email me. I mean, that's crystal clear. Okay, email them, and then they will. In I don't know. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but in most cases, they will check the email. So it's just about coming across in the right way there. And if you're coming across like the people, like the person you just mentioned, like there's just no chance that, I mean, it's so difficult to come back from that. Like if that's how you've come across initially, like because
Yeah.
most of them will give you like at least a few seconds to just maybe they'll like, for example, on X, if you DM them, you have a proper profile picture, you have a proper handle, your like what the bio is at least just mid, and you give them like a maybe slightly above average DM, they'll most likely click on your profile and at least just give it like a few seconds, and that's where you have the chance to stand out. Uh, Besides, of course, creating something of value and providing it to them. So yeah, I think that's just also like I suppose like kind of common misconception I've seen from a lot of people, that it's important or not, it's impossible to reach these people. Like how in the world? Like I don't have a network or anything. And like as again, like with me, like I mentioned it earlier with my family and anyone I grew up with, like no one in entrepreneurial space or anything. Like I've kind of just gotten that from DMing people, creating content. Yeah. So I think that's just important to keep in mind as well, that you you're lucky enough to live at a time where literally anyone is within reach if you just show that you have the skill or the agency to and the hunger to just go go do things. Yeah.
You can just do things. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay, I have one last question for you, and thank you so much for your time so far. But if you could spend a full day with anyone, and who would that be that you would not get bored talking to?
it's a good question. I think I I talked with someone else about this like earlier this year or something about who I would have on a podcast if I could. And I think I would leave out all of the maybe like obvious answers, like for example Elon. I think sure, like he's impossible to get his time off, and like maybe now he has even more security, so you can't even get close to him. But I would probably leave out all of those people who have gone on a ton of podcasts, and you can go and listen to like 20 hours or 50 hours of them talking, and more some people who are, I don't know, like one guy comes to mind is Jack Smith. He's gone on a few podcasts, and you can still go listen to him, and that's also where he why he kind of comes to mind. He's good friends with Sam Parr, so he's been on the My First Million podcast a few times, and he just always has interesting things to talk about, and he seems very humble as well about seemingly whatever you talk about with him, he knows so much, but he's very humble about it. And I think he just seems like a person who is just endlessly curious and would just be interesting to talk to. Then um, I think Ed Thorpe. I think he's really interesting to me. I think
Name's familiar. Who's that?
he's very old as well. So he's just because he seems like he like if you compare it to some of the other greats that people might think about, like Elon or Zuckerberg or someone like that, where they've obviously also gotten to that level of success because they've compromised on a lot of other things. So they don't have that same balance in their life that would result in you both building something great, leaving a legacy behind, but also throughout that probably that you have like a fulfilling personal life, like building really meaningful relationships there. And I think Ed Thorpe, he seems like an example of doing that fairly well, like finding a bit of that blueprint to like finding a good balance there. And I think I don't know that much about this guy, but Tom Anderson, he also just he built MySpace. Like I think he was the
Oh,
co-founder.
MySpace Tom.
Yeah, and he sold it and he made however much. I think the number is like high 400 millions, like close to half a billion or something. And then he just said, "Fuck yeah! I mean, I made my money. Like now, I'm just gonna go travel the world." If you go to his Instagram, he posts a lot about. I don't think he posts anymore, but he kind of got into photography. It seems like maybe he already was, but he just posting a lot there. Someone like that who, who kind of just went off right after building something great. I think would just be really interesting to talk to.
That's cool. Yeah, MySpace Tom. That's a really good one because I've seen his content and it is a really like cool story because it's rare that you see that someone's just like, yeah, I made a bunch of money and now I just travel and party. It
Yeah,
doesn't seem like that's the way that it actually works in tech.
yeah, exactly. It's usually when you sell that, then everyone you talk with, like, so what's your next thing? And you'll probably have some investors approaching you or something about, yeah, we'll fund your next thing, or like, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and there's always like the next thing to kind of prove that you still
yeah,
have it or whatever. But I love that you're looking for people who have that work-life balance for like personal life, professional life balance. That's interesting.
yeah, because I think like it would also be very interesting to meet some of the people who are just really obsessed with some of these other things, but I think a lot of that comes across in whatever they're putting out into the world already. Maybe they're doing some podcast, or they have a book, or they have a bunch of people who've done some sort of breakdowns and analyses of whatever they're doing and their obsessive nature, and there's some stories about them or something. I feel like I've talked with a few of those type of people, and it's always extremely like much of a bit of a wake up call of like how obsessed and locked in you can be, and also usually how fast you can move. But I think yeah, I like to think more like spending that whole day would be more about someone who's obsessive about building something great, but also like in terms of company, money, success, but then also in terms of personal life. So for example, Brunello Cucinelli, he comes to mind as well. If you know him, he also just like he's put out a bit of content. He's has like a blog or something. I think he has a book. But he also just lives in Italy, like it's kind of small town, and he has like a usual just daily routine, and by whenever like 5 6 p.m. leaves to work, then goes for like getting dinner and drinking wine with his friends, talking about philosophy until the late evening, then gets back to work the next day. Like something like that, even if it's not what I might strive for myself. It might be like I don't quite know, but even if whatever they've come to is not exactly what I want, just that seemingly like deliberate choice to still having that balance would be very interesting to talk with someone about.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think actually we may see more of that in the future where it's sort of less of a high status signal to be locked in grinding your entire life nonstop, and more so to just have that sort of have balance could be like the new high status thing. Like, oh, you have time to relax. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. And thank you for joining us.
of course. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks.